there's been a lot of speculation. I think the biggest conversation right now, right, is going to be around the future of John Harbaugh and the Baltimore Ravens, because that has continued to be brought up, especially as the season has gone the way that it has, and then especially the way that it ended. And I just mentioned, when you lose, you have to reevaluate. And when you lose with high expectations, then changes can be made. So I want to start with some of the player reactions after, and then we'll get into what Adam Schefter said on the Pat McAfee show, because I think it's all very intriguing. Now, I want to preface, after a game, players are emotional and they don't want to be thinking about the future, but the way it's answered, it's going to make you think, because we're going to evaluate things here. So Lamar Jackson was hot after the game. Jameson Hensley then asked Lamar a question specifically about Harbaugh, the future for Lamar and the Ravens. Let's play Lamar's reaction first.
You asking me about next year. I'm so caught up in what just happened tonight. I can't focus on that right now. I just told you, like he asked me, "Are you stunned?" I'm stunned right now. I'm still trying to process what's going on. Like, I know we lost, but what the, like, you know?
All right, thank you, Lamar.
Yeah, he wanted to say fuck.
He
might have.
He half said it.
So that was Lamar. And the part was, he was very pissed off, and rightfully so. That's a heartbreaking one, especially the ways that they've lost recently. It's been right down to the buzzer in the do or die games. Now, Ronnie Stanley was asked another variation of the question, but it was about John Harbaugh and the future of the team. Let's play his reaction real quickly.
Yeah, I mean, I just let those guys handle those things. My job is to lead my O-line, lead my offense, lead the guys that are in the locker room. That's what I try to keep my focus on, and try to keep it simple. So, I love Harbs, and everything he's done for the team, and whatever they handle, that's their business.
Okay, so being in situations in the past when things are on the line, right? And just in the sports world, in my opinion, when you have an affinity for a person, especially when it's on the line, you're going to hear guys maybe mention that in the forefront. On the other side, I heard Pat Freiermuth talking about Mike Tomlin, saying we did it for Coach T. They go, what do you mean by that? And they said, well, everyone wanting him fired. But that was out in the media. And it wasn't asked. It was just Pat Freiermuth's response. So for Ronnie right there, he says, I'm focusing on what I can do to help this team and whatever the team decides to do. Well, Steve Bisciotti has some decisions to make.
Yeah.
And look, you guys know I love John Harbaugh, the Harbaugh family.
I do too.
But this is now a discussion, and it's going to be a hard decision that's going to happen here, because change has to happen, whether it's your staff or the one that's running the whole operation, and that's your head coach. So then Adam Schefter was on the Pat McAfee show today, and he was asked about the possibility. And Adam Schefter didn't say about even a possibility. He went as far as to say John Harbaugh would be the most coveted. So let's play that clip for you guys.
Luke makes that kick. The Baltimore Ravens are hosting a playoff game, and they're winning the AFC North. Instead, potential holy water from Father Maximilian Maxwell potentially pushes that thing to the right. Let's talk about the Harbaugh situation, because you and Glazer both saying basically the same thing yesterday during your coaching report. Tomlin doesn't feel like it's that hot. Tomlin will make the decision. I think you both have alluded to him potentially doing TV, which would be awesome. We would very much welcome Mike Tomlin on a microphone more often, because he hits a home run on a mic every time he's on a mic. And if he continues to coach, he continues to coach. Both of you said, though, Harbaugh feels like a much different situation. Is Harbaugh in the world where he would have to make the decision to step down, or how do you think that would kind of come about, especially after how last night unfolded?
I think, look, Mike Tomlin's been in Pittsburgh 19 years. John Harbaugh has been in Baltimore 18 years. They are the two longest tenured head coaches with their teams in the National Football League. And these questions have come up with them repeatedly. And I think, we heard it from the fans of Pittsburgh. We've heard it some from the fans in Baltimore. I think over time, fans, they've called for their head coach's job. They don't have an appreciation for the job these men have done over time. And they want something new and something fresh. So with John Harbaugh, I don't think either one of these coaches, Mike Tomlin, John Harbaugh, are getting fired. I think, look, the Ravens season is over, so these conversations can now occur. You go in and you talk. What is your vision for the future? Do you want me here? What is your vision for the future? Do you want me? And they talk it out. But it just feels like there are things to discuss this year. The season didn't go the way the Ravens wanted it to go. It was another year where either Zay Flowers drops the ball near the goal line in the AFC Championship, or Mark Andrews on the 2-point conversion, or Tyler Loop. It ends in disappointment. And when that keeps happening, you have conversations to discuss how you want to address it and how you want to fix it. And if either side wants to make a change, and maybe mutually, by the way, like if Baltimore wants to move on and go hire whoever else, John Harbaugh automatically, to me, becomes the Mike Vrabel of this year's coaching class. He automatically vaults to the top of most lists, and he'd have a job tomorrow. So what does John Harbaugh want to do? Where does he want to coach? Right? We've got openings in Arizona. We've got openings in New York. We've got openings in Cleveland. Where does he want to go coach? Does he want to be in Baltimore? Does he want to go elsewhere? That's up for him to decide.
So I thought it was very interesting because John Harbaugh deserves the respect. He's earned it. But right now for the Ravens, the question's going to have to be delivered, and then it's going to have to be decided by Steve Bisciotti. What is the direction for the Baltimore Ravens moving forward? Because, guys, if Harbaugh wants to be here, I have a hard time seeing him go elsewhere because they're saying he'd be traded, or it's a mutual parting of ways. If it's not, the whole coaching staff's going to get shaken up because you can't have this year happen and run it back with the same group that you had. And I'm talking about, unfortunately, for Zach Orr, Todd Monken. Something's going to have to give. It might be both of them if John Harbaugh stays as the coach. But to Adam's point, teams around the league have been chomping at the bit to feel like they can be relevant again. And John Harbaugh, being with the Ravens, whether people want to admit that or not, they have been a stable organization, and John deserves credit on that. And Zach, I think those are the rumblings that we're hearing. And if I'm John, if Steve really saying, hey, we want to move on, I think it would have to be sooner than later because
it has to be.
Probably want to make this decision on John as well.
Yeah, this decision has to be made soon. And I will say, I'm so tired of analysts and insiders and stuff talking about, the Ravens, and they're like, well, I feel like they just don't appreciate what John has done. I appreciate 13 years ago we hoisted a Lombardi. That was dope. But since then, we've had ups and downs. I think, you've been to one AFC, 2 AFC championships since then. You've had a top 2-3 quarterback at the position now for going on 7 years as a starter. You've made it to a single AFC championship. We've had a million different coordinators. We've had a million different sets of players, and it feels like they lose the same way every time. And I think it comes down to one common denominator. There's one man who's been there who oversees it all. So I think it's at the point where, John Harbaugh, if he is let go, if he is given the go ahead to go look for another job, he's going to have his pick. And that's the reality of it. And he should. What he's accomplished. I just think the message is stale in Baltimore. I don't think it's anything to do with his ability to coach. I think he establishes a culture. I think he raises the floor. But I think we're just at the point. Same thing. I think the most, closely related situation is the whole Andy Reid in Philly. Andy Reid was very successful in Philly. It was just time for a change. It was just, hey. Yeah. And so And guess who that's worked out for? Both.
Everybody.
I think both the Eagles and Andy Reid are very happy with how things have unfolded since then. Multiple rings between both of them. So no, it says I don't think the decision has anything to do with will people want John Harbaugh? Yeah, they're going to want John Harbaugh. I'll go even as far to say if the Ravens announced right now that John Harbaugh they were parting ways, that there are going to be some teams that question whether they want to get rid of their guy so that they can get into the John Harbaugh sweepstakes. I think he is still a great coach. The message is just after 18 years, that happens. Like, it's not like he's in year 5 or 6 and you're like, oh man, it's the message. This is 18, 19 years. Like, this is just, that happens. That's the natural part of being a coach. You're hired to be fired eventually, and only a few ever don't get that. We had Bill Belichick, one of, if not the greatest to ever do it, get fired from New England. They botched the first hire. Let's call it what it was.
Yep.
But within a year later, man, they're right back to what they were. I think it's at that point where it's not hey, you're a bad coach. Hey, we don't believe you're a good coach. All this stuff. Simply put, message is stale. I think both guys could benefit from a change of scenery and a different voice.
You know what I'm curious about is it goes back to what I mentioned earlier about identity. Like, what do you want your team to be moving forward? It's going to be with Lamar Jackson as your quarterback. That would be the biggest shock if Lamar leaves Baltimore. I don't see that happening at all. That also is what can ruin a franchise, trading an all-time great, which Lamar is going to go down as. If he continues to play, he's going to go down as one of the all-time greats, and you can't even imagine trading one of those guys in his prime. But the thing is, whoever is the head coach, if John stays or it's someone new, guys, the expectation is going to be the same.
Yep.
Because even with the group that they have, the core pieces, they can still build around and should still contend to win the AFC North and should still contend to win the AFC. But how do you want to do that? I think that's the part that I'm really curious of how it's going to unfold. But you know who needs stability if you're looking out there? Like, the Giants need stability. They got some young pieces on the offense and defensive side. That's an appealing place. And I think there's been a lot of links there for what I'm seeing is that the Giants would be really interested in Harbaugh.
Yeah.
And it makes sense. You know, it really does. But Brad, I'm still having this feeling. I have a hard time seeing Harbaugh not here for some reasons. I know it might sound crazy, but I think there is a real plausible chance. And I don't know if you have a chance to put a poll out.
I'm typing it up now.
So perfect about, like, what do you guys think is going to happen here? Because it's so unique. When was the last coach being traded? Was that Sean Payton?
Yeah.
Yes.
I mean, they got a haul for him. I don't see
I was going to say, for a pretty good haul.
Yeah, they got first in that, didn't they?
Yeah, first and a second.
I'll
So
take
the
a
question is
third.
going to be, whoever, hypothetically, you want to go grass is greener, who's the guy that comes in? More than likely right now, it's going to be a brand new face. I don't think they're going to bring in another veteran coach. I think it would have to be an up-and-comer.
I think so, too.
And do you want to risk that?
The only quote-unquote not new coach I would consider is Brian Flores, but let's be honest. Let's address the elephant in the room. I don't know with an active, I'm pretty sure it's still active, lawsuit against the NFL. I'm not sure he gets a head coaching job. I think he deserves it, but I just think Brian Flores.
Oh, Brian Flores. Sorry.
I said that would be the only one that in my head isn't a, new up and coming coach. He's obviously had his head coaching career in Miami, but I do think that's just the weird part is with the active lawsuit. I don't know if the NFL usually doesn't like those things.
You know, one thing I saw out there with Flores, and I actually think it would be a dynamite combination, is they said, what if Brady brought in Brian Flores and Brian Dable? It'd be interesting. But regardless of it, you know what I love with Brian Flores' defenses? They're tough. They're ferocious. It's a huge reason why the Vikings have been as good as they have been. This year was the quarterback play for them, but guess what? They finished 9-8, and they were in the same case for the Ravens. A game here or there, they actually took care of business, they'd be in the playoffs.
I mean, might be unpopular opinion, or might be popular. Marcus Freeman seems like a really good Ravens head coach.
Couldn't beat Marshall. It's just mine. I just don't think. I'll say this. I don't see why Marcus Freeman. I think college, especially when you have a job like Notre Dame, especially, I'll just say it, especially if they really sign this clause, and I mean, obviously it's official, where they just have to be like in the top 12 before a certain date, and they're automatically in the college football playoff. It just feels like they make their own schedule, all that. I think Notre Dame is just a little bit too cushy of a job to make that jump. But I mean, I know I've seen links and stuff. I will say it's not for a head coach, but rarely will I, pound the table for a Mount St. Joe grad. But Jim Schwartz, Kevin Stefanski out in Cleveland. I think this would be defensive coordinator. I don't think you give him, but that's a guy I would make him the highest paid defensive coordinator in football. Bring in a young offensive mind. Jim Schwartz, veteran coach to lean on for the young guy, but also, I mean, we've seen everywhere he goes, that defense, he brings the defense with him. I think you need an experienced defensive coordinator, someone a little psycho. I think that's what they need.
Oh man.
I mean, gosh, that would be awesome.
But so that's the part. The realistic possibility is Harbaugh stays. But if he does, there has to be drastic changes to how you're philosophically run your defense and your offense. And I hated for Zach Orr because last year, the last 10 weeks of the season, they were the number one defense. And then through the injuries and the scheme, the adjustments didn't happen and the results weren't there. And it's a business. And that sucks.
Yeah.
And it also sucks even more for Zach Orr because the guy that you ended up replacing is the hottest head coach right now and has the number one seed in the NFC, Mike McDonald and the Seattle Seahawks.
Yeah, I don't want to talk about that.
I will say this. There are two sides to the Zach Orr conversation. I think both can be true. Zach Orr has not lived up to the standard of what a Ravens defense should look like or is expected to look like. Yep. They have fallen short. But I think you also, and yes, I'm not giving excuses or anything, there's something to be said of taking the job of defensive coordinator at 32 years old and not having that much experience and all this. I think Zach Orr, whether he's I don't think he's a defensive coordinator next year. I think he'll probably be a linebacker coach somewhere. But if we think this is the last we see of Zach Orr as a defensive coordinator, I think the best is still yet to come for him.
I agree.
I don't think it's one of those. I don't think it's ridiculous to say, hey, great defensive mind, very high upside. At 32 years old, maybe it was too soon to make him the DC, and that's also paired with, we can talk all about, like Q said, where EDC buys the groceries and the coaches have to cook with those. They didn't have pass rush. And once you lost Matabike, you really didn't have pass rush.
Yeah.
Once you got rid of, now he didn't produce here as well. Once you got rid of Oweh, you really didn't have pass rush. So it just felt like he was put in an unfortunate situation, maybe player-wise.
I don't know. Here's what I'll say to that, Zach. I understand this personnel matters. But they were 30th in yards allowed. 30th. And there was also 3 first-round picks in the secondary, like 18th in points allowed. So it wasn't even just like the Ravens standard. It wasn't just a defensive standard. It's just the NFL standard. Like, I'm with you. Maybe Zach Orr, maybe it's not the last we see of him. It's going to be a long time before he's a defensive coordinator anywhere.
Yeah, I think a few seasons. But I just think I just can't, with the way the defense, like even last night, like it sucks because like it's like, oh, blown coverage, Calvin Austin wide open. And I'm sitting there, and I'll be honest, I was screaming at my TV. I was like, how the hell do you let someone just not cover someone? Then you see Awuzie just flat out slipped. And it's like that kind of stuff. I think it's a combination of everything. It's like what I said. I don't think anyone in this organization is absolved from the blame. I think everyone had a part to play in it. And I think, from the very top to the very bottom. And that's just kind of, I think they have to go away from this up and coming coach on defense and go back to the guys that have made their money doing this. Like Jim Schwartz, like the dude has just gone out there. It's like when Philly brought in Vic Fangio and suddenly it was like, oh, this defense is the real deal. He gets everything out of them. I think you need a veteran coach, especially. I'm going to say whether they keep Harbaugh or not. You need new coaches underneath them, and we'll go from there. But you need a psycho defensive coordinator.
And you need to go back to what your team wants to be. And if you want to be physical, gritty, ferocious, strike fear in the other team, well, it's going to have to start in the trenches.